Tonight, step outside and look up. That pale disk hanging up there, you've seen it your entire life. You probably don't think about it much. But what if it was just gone? Not dimmed, not hidden by clouds, erased, no warning, no debris, just an empty sky where it used to be. Most people imagine it would be a little darker at night. Maybe the tides would change a bit. That's the obvious answer, and it's almost completely wrong. The real consequences are so much larger and so much stranger that they would reshape life on Earth within years. Let's start with the tides, because the tides are the reason any of this matters. The moon's gravity pulls on Earth's oceans continuously, creating bulges of water on both sides of the planet. As Earth rotates, coastlines pass through those bulges, and that's your tide coming in and going out. The sun also pulls on Earth's oceans, but the moon is much closer, making its tidal effect roughly 2.2 times stronger. Without the moon, tides would still exist, but they'd shrink to about 45% of their current size. That sounds manageable, but think about what tides actually do. Tidal zones, the strips of coastline that flood and drain twice a day, are among the most productive ecosystems on the planet. Barnacles, crabs, mussels, sea stars, and thousands of fish species rely on those daily tidal cycles to feed and reproduce. Weaker tides mean smaller mixing zones. Smaller mixing zones mean less oxygen circulating in shallow coastal water. And less oxygen in coastal waters is a death sentence for enormous stretches of marine life. But the tides are only the beginning. The moon does something else that almost nobody thinks about. It stabilizes Earth's axial tilt. Right now, Earth tilts at about 23.5 degrees, and the moon's gravity acts like a gyroscopic anchor, keeping that angle steady. Without the moon, that tilt would wobble chaotically between roughly 0 and 85 degrees over millions of years. This was confirmed by Jacques Lascar and his team at the Paris Observatory in 1993. Lascar's simulations showed that without the moon, Earth's obliquity, its axial tilt, becomes wildly unpredictable on timescales of just tens of millions of years. What does a 0-degree tilt look like? No seasons at all. The poles would be permanently frozen. The tropics would be locked in permanent baking heat. An 85-degree tilt is even more extreme. Half the planet would spend 6 months in total daylight and 6 months in total darkness, with temperatures swinging hundreds of degrees between the two. Complex life as we know it probably could not survive those swings. So the moon isn't just a light in the sky, it's a planetary stabilizer. But here's what's fascinating. Even in the short term, years, not millions of years, the moon's disappearance would cause immediate, visible chaos. Let's talk about nights. A full moon on a clear night produces about 0.001 lux of illumination. That's not a lot, but it is enough for a dark-adapted human eye to see clearly across an open field. Without the moon, the only natural light at night comes from stars and faint air glow, a background luminosity about 1,000 times dimmer than moonlight. Completely moonless nights already exist, during new moon phases. Ask anyone who lives in truly rural darkness what those nights feel like. Now imagine every single night forever at that level of darkness. For predators, this would be an advantage. Owls, big cats, wolves, animals that already hunt in low light, would have every single night as their territory. For prey animals, and for early humans, the calculus of nighttime safety would have been completely different. Researchers at the University of Calgary published a 2019 study showing that mountain lions in North America increased their hunting by 36% on darker nights. A permanently moonless Earth would essentially be a permanently dark night, and apex predators would reorganize around that fact within a generation. And now for the part almost nobody quotes. The moon is slowing down Earth's rotation. Through tidal friction, the moon steals a tiny bit of Earth's rotational energy every year. And as a result, our days are getting longer, by about 1.4 milliseconds per century. That sounds tiny, but look backward in time and the effect is enormous. 4 billion years ago, an Earth day was only about 6 hours long. This was confirmed by studying stromatolites, ancient layered rock formations, made by cyanobacteria, which record daily growth cycles in their layers like tree rings. Without the moon, Earth's rotation would stop slowing down. The days wouldn't get shorter immediately, but over deep time, Earth's spin would stabilize at whatever rate it happened to be at. That might sound harmless, but organisms have evolved over hundreds of millions of years around a 24-hour cycle. your circadian rhythm, the biological clock inside almost every living cell on Earth. In 1984, researchers Jürgen Aschoff and Rutger Wever at the Max Planck Institute isolated volunteers in bunkers with no time cues, and found that without external signals, the human body runs on a cycle of roughly 24 to 25 hours. Change the length of the day by even a few hours, and you break the synchronization between the environment and the biological clock. Sleep disorders, hormonal disruption, immune system breakdown, at a planetary scale, for every organism with a biological clock, which is essentially everything. Now let's zoom out even further, to one of the most important questions in biology. How did life get on land in the first place? The answer involves tidal pools. Tidal pools are the transition zones where sea creatures were repeatedly stranded by retreating tides, forced to cope with air, with warmth, with drying, over millions of generations. The evolutionary biologist Niels Schubin, who discovered Tiktaalik, the fossil fish with proto-limbs, argued in his 2008 book, Your Inner Fish, that tidal zones were central to the invasion of land. Without the moon's strong tides, tidal pools would have been far smaller, far less dynamic, and far less disruptive to marine life. The pressures that drove sea creatures onto land might never have materialized, which means no amphibians, no reptiles, no dinosaurs, no mammals, no you. The moon may not just be a convenience, it may be a prerequisite. But let's say the moon disappears tonight. Not 4 billion years ago. Tonight. What happens in the first minutes? You'd look up and see nothing where the moon was, an empty hole of darkness in the star field. Within hours, coastal communities would notice something strange. The tides would weaken overnight. Not gone, the sun would still pull, but noticeably reduced. Ports built around tidal timing would immediately face problems. Tidal mills, still used in parts of Europe, would slow. Navies and coast guards would rewrite their tidal charts within the first week. Within months, marine biologists would start noticing the collapse of intertidal zone species. The species that depend on being alternately submerged and exposed would find that rhythm disrupted. Some researchers estimate the intertidal zone supports over 6,000 distinct species globally, all directly reliant on tidal cycles. Within a year, the effects would ripple up the food chain. Fish that feed in tidal zones, seabirds that feed on those fish, mammals that feed on those birds, and global fisheries, which feed roughly 3.3 billion people, about 42% of humanity, would begin to feel the pressure. Now think about the night sky beyond the tides. Human civilization organized itself around the moon for thousands of years. The word month comes from the Old English monath, literally meaning moon. The Islamic calendar, the Hebrew calendar, the Chinese lunisolar calendar, all built around lunar cycles. Religious festivals, planting seasons, fishing expeditions, all synchronized to the moon's 29.5-day cycle. Without the moon, entire cultural and religious systems would lose their organizing framework. That sounds abstract, but it isn't. Ramadan, Passover, Diwali, the Chinese New Year. The timing of all of these depends on the lunar calendar. Roughly 3 billion people observe traditions directly tied to lunar timing. Now let's talk about something most scientists bring up and then move past too quickly. The moon's effect on animal behavior. Coral spawning, one of nature's most spectacular mass reproduction events, is triggered by the full moon. The Great Barrier Reef spawns once a year, within days of the November full moon, every single year, without fail. Without the moon, that synchronization signal is gone. Coral reproduction would become scattered, inefficient, fragmented, and coral reefs support approximately 25% of all ocean species, despite covering less than 1% of the ocean floor. Sea turtles navigate back to their birth beaches using the moon's position to orient their internal compass. Dung beetles, studied at the University of the Witwatersrand in 2013, use the Milky Way and moonlight to navigate in a straight line. Without the moon, that straight line navigation fails. The beetles veer off course. They get lost. Birds that migrate at night use moonlight as part of their navigation toolkit. Billions of birds migrate every single year using a combination of stars, magnetic fields, and moonlight. Take away one pillar of that system and the navigation is compromised for an enormous number of species. There is a name for the ecological cascade that would follow. Scientists call it a trophic cascade. When a keystone element is removed, the effects don't stay local. They propagate through every layer of an ecosystem. The moon, in this framework, is a keystone element of Earth's entire biological system. Pull the keystone, and the arch collapses. Now, here's the part that ties everything together. The moon exists because of a catastrophe. About 4.5 billion years ago, a Mars-sized body called Theia slammed into early Earth at roughly 40,000 kilometers per hour. The debris ejected from that impact coalesced in orbit. Over tens of millions of years, it formed the moon. The giant impact hypothesis. That's what scientists call it. And it's the leading explanation for why we have such a large moon relative to Earth's size. Most moons in our solar system are tiny relative to their planets. Our moon is about 1/4 the diameter of Earth. That size is not an accident, and neither are its effects. If Theia had been slightly smaller, the moon would be smaller. The tides would be weaker, the axial stabilization less powerful. If Theia hadn't hit at all, the moon wouldn't exist, and everything we've discussed in this video, every single consequence, would already be the reality. You are here watching this video because a rogue planet hit the early Earth at exactly the right angle and speed 4.5 billion years ago. That is not hyperbole. That is the actual chain of causation. So go back to tonight. Back to that pale disk you barely notice. That object is not decoration. It is holding Earth's axial tilt steady. It is driving the tidal rhythms that feed billions of people. It is synchronizing the reproduction of coral reefs that underpin 25% of marine life. It is guiding migrating birds. It is navigating beetles. It is slowing Earth's spin at the rate of 1.4 milliseconds per century, keeping our days at a length that biological life has evolved to depend on. And it existed in the first place because a rogue body the size of Mars hit Earth when the solar system was still forming. Astronomers sometimes call this the rare Earth hypothesis, the idea that complex life requires an extraordinarily specific set of conditions and that most planets simply don't have them. A large stabilizing moon may be one of the rarest requirements of all, and we won the cosmic lottery to have it. Tonight, when you step outside and look up at that pale disk, you are looking at the thing that made you possible. It stabilized the planet that grew you. It shaped the seas that first carried life toward land. It lit the nights that your ancestors navigated. You never had to think about any of this. The moon was just doing its job. The moon didn't disappear tonight. And because of that, quietly, completely without your permission, you exist.